what really links music and surfing in like a really deep way for me is that growing up on surf films and watching Tom Curran, like, you know, like watching how he put his hand and thinking, okay, next time I surf, I'm going to do that. Or like how he brings his back knee in, or just touches the water on the bottom turn, or like, you know, throws his weight this way. And you'd go out and you'd want to do that, and you'd kind of be like studying, you'd kind of study that. And as you were studying it, and like even rewinding a section and watching it again or something, that same song was playing over and over and over, and it would just get ingrained in your head. So then when you go surf, I think it just made you feel like you're ripping even harder if you were like, why do you feel like a wild child?
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready, boys? Start swinging.
That's Jack Johnson. I'm Jamie Brissack, and this is Soundings, brought to you by the Surfer's Journal. The Journal is a member-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from Costa Sunglasses, Finisterre, Freefly, Howler Brothers, Patagonia, Rainbow Sandals, Vans, and Yeti. More like a book than a magazine, the Journal delivers 136 pages of independent storytelling every 8 weeks, covering the people, culture, travel, and art of surfing. To learn more and to subscribe, please visit surfersjournal.com. This episode of Soundings is proudly presented by Rainbow Sandals. 50 years ago, surfer Sparky Longley was so frustrated with all the poorly made sandals he found broken and forgotten in the sand that, with just a few $100s to his name, he bought a sewing machine, formulated his own glue and rubber, and set out to make something better. The result was Rainbow Sandals. That same attention to material, construction, and longevity continues to define each and every pair. Head over to rainbowsandals.com to pick up yours. Jack Johnson is a multi-platinum selling singer-songwriter, surfer, and environmentalist, but you probably already know that. I can give you a more personal take. I watched it unfold in real time. I first encountered Jack in the trials of the 1992 Pipeline Masters. He was charging heavy backdoor barrels like he was playing tag in his backyard, which he sort of was. I thought that he was destined to become a major pro, and I think Jack did too. Not long after, however, he headbutted the reef out there badly, got more than 100 stitches in his forehead, and lost teeth. It may have been a blessing in disguise. In college at UCSB, Jack studied film. He and his friend Chris Malloy cooked up the idea for what would become the seminal surf flick Thicker Than Water. A couple years later, they followed up with September Sessions. Jack had been playing guitar and writing songs since childhood, and on one of the trips for his movies, he wrote a song called Rodeo Clowns, which related to a trick his good buddy Kelly Slater was working on. Jack recorded the song with his friend G-Love of G-Love and Special Sauce. Rodeo Clowns became a hit. His music career more than took off. It skyrocketed. One day he was a shy kid playing to a small crowd at the Belly Up in Solana Beach. The next he was on every radio station. 9 records, many hits, and a laundry list of awards later, Jack is still the same guy I met on the beach more than 30 years ago. In 2008, he and his wife Kim created the Johnson Ohana Charitable Foundation, a non-profit public charity supporting environmental, art, and music education worldwide. They have 3 kids and live on the North Shore. Jack still surfs regularly. In fact, his life is not terribly dissimilar to the one he knew in his teens, though he's now a household name, sells out major venues, and sometimes hears his own music playing in the supermarket. Jack and I spoke at a hotel in Laguna Beach the morning after he played a show celebrating his first 2 films. Jack wore sandals, jeans, and a t-shirt on stage, and he wore the same when we spoke. He also brought along his guitar. Jack, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jamie. Great to be hanging.
Yeah. When you were a teenager and you were dreaming your life, what did that dream look like?
That's a great question. And I like to really rewind and try to put myself in the actual headspace and think about it and not just give you a quick one. I grew up on the North Shore of Oahu. Everything I knew was surfing. My hero was Tom Curran. He was just everything to me. not just because he ripped. That was like the big part. I'd see him in movies and everything, but it was just something about his charisma, the way he carried himself. I'd see him in the films, and then I would see him around when I was a teenager on the North Shore every winter. That's the crazy thing about growing up in Hawaii near Pipeline and Sunset and all these spots that everybody was surfing, is that you'd see him on the big screen, and then you'd see him in real life. And there was Mark Akalupo right there at Foodland, and there was, you'd be at, like, I used to work at D'Amico's when I was a teenager, which was all pizza shop that's not there anymore. And sometimes I'd be making pizzas in the back or washing dishes, and I would see Martin Potter walk up and order a pizza, and it was like, oh my God, there they are. And you could check them out in real life. So I used to look up to Tom. I used to look up to all these pro surfers. So I wanted to be a pro surfer. I think most kids on the North Shore think maybe I could be a pro surfer because it's all around you. But at some point, I kind of realized I wasn't going to be one of those guys that could qualify or surf small waves. You're kind of unless you're going to town or east side all the time to surf like smaller waves, I was kind of somebody who felt real comfortable in bigger surf. And so I guess I started seeing my blueprint a little bit like Brock Little, Todd Chesser, guys like that, guys that were surfing pipe specialists. But I was a regular foot too, so backdoor was coming on the scene around that time. Most people were going left until Johnny Boy Gomes, Dan Kealoha. I would see those guys going right, and I was like, okay, that's where I want to do. I want to get barrel going right at Pipeline. So I think my biggest dream I had was like maybe I could figure out a way to kind of milk this thing and figure out a way to be a pro surfer.
Interesting. And was music in your head a lot at that time?
Music, when I look back, I always really loved music. I didn't become aware about making music until I was about 14 years old. That's when I learned my first chords. But I always had music in the house. My parents loved music, and we had record players always, and they were always putting on great stuff. So I grew up always hearing like Otis Redding, Tina Turner, the Beatles, and trying to think of like the stuff that was on in the house, just all kinds of stuff, cool jazz. My dad loved Hawaiian music, so he'd always put on the college radio station and the local stations and hear a lot of great Hawaiian music growing up, Gabi Pahinui and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it's just a mixture of a lot of great music always coming in. You realize later how important that is. It's just the stuff that's becoming part of your source before you realize it. It's not intentional. It's just soaking in. So yeah, I had a family that loved music and played a lot of music around the house and had a real happy, loving, warm household, just always a lot of joy in the house, and feel really lucky for that. And when I started playing, I loved making music. And the fun thing was, it sounds like almost like a made-up story, but Kelly Slater, myself, Donovan Frankenreiter, Rob Machado, we all learned to play guitar right at the same time. And we had one of my dad's really good friends, his name's Pef Ike, and he's a great surfer and awesome uncle. And so he started showing us chords on the guitar. He taught us how to play Cat Stevens. We learned Father and Son. We learned Where Do the Children Play? And we learned Jimmy Buffett's A Pirate Looks at 40 were like the first couple songs that we all learned. And we'd sit around trying to play the chords. And to me, music was really something that you would sit around and do with a lot of friends. And my grandma lived next door, and so my grandma would be right there. My brother had kids pretty shortly around that time when I was a teenager. And so like they were always just around the deck, and we'd all play, we'd all sing. It was just like a real family thing. All the songs you'd play, you'd always choose songs that everybody knew the words for, because then I wouldn't really sing at first. I'd play the chords and I would kind of whisper and barely project, but everybody would sing together, sing-alongs basically, front porch sing-alongs. And that was music for me. Maybe in the same way that you dream like, oh, could I ever be a pro surfer? Like, I don't know if you think it's going to happen, but you think deep inside, even if you're not going to tell somebody, maybe that's what you want, I think I didn't assume I was going to be a pro surfer when I was young, but I think I wanted to be one.
Yeah.
And then I started seeing, kind of going back to what we were talking about, oh, maybe there is like, I am kind of okay at surfing backdoor, and I feel really comfortable in bigger surf. Like maybe I do have like a little way I can do this. And I think at some point it becomes the same thing with music, but that didn't happen for me until like way after college. Mm-hmm. I think all the way through college. I had bands in high school, like a punk band called Limber Chicken. I had a band in college called Soil, and it was a jam band, just really fun, just a bunch of friends making music. And I can honestly tell you, like, if I put myself back in my mind then, there was never a thought of like music as an option. It was just something that I felt really lucky to have in my life, and man, this is fun, and I knew I'd always do it. But it wasn't until a lot later that I even saw that little thing of, oh, maybe I could do this, you know. It was
Right.
way later in the story.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, because I think the dreaming of being a pro surfer is an extremely creative act unto itself. You know, it's in your imagination. I always think of it as kind of trying to mine the inner Superman. You want to step into this higher version of yourself, or higher may be the wrong word for it, but this other version of yourself.
Yeah,
exceptional. Totally. Yeah. But so I first encountered you in 1992 Pipeline Masters, and you were charging backdoor barrels, and I didn't know you. It's funny because I knew your older brothers, but I didn't know you, and I was so impressed. And my immediate thought was, this guy's going to be great, you know.
Yeah.
And then it was not long after that you had a serious accident, right?
Yeah, that was. Yeah, being the Pipe Masters, that was such a lucky thing. You know, there was like 100 kids on the North Shore that could have had that spot. And I grew up living right in front of the wave, and so we would surf pipeline. If it was 2 feet, I would take out like little twin fins and go surf like small backdoor. If it was like the beginning of a little west swell, sometimes pipe can be kind of fun on a west. When it's real small, it's a pretty average little mushy wave, like when it's like shoulder high, and then it starts to get about head high, and it can kind of do a quick barrel, and then it pinches. It's not like great yet, but a certain swell, especially like a west swell, sometimes the left will run. And living right there, we would just watch it, and anytime it would be halfway decent, we'd surf out there. And so there were more talented kids my age at the time. That's not false humility. There was a lot of kids that could have got that spot. It was really just, I put the time in, and I was out there all the time, and so I got that chance to surf it, and that was luck. That was, and then I got really lucky to make a few heats. You know, I made the finals of the trials. I got the list is crazy of people I surfed against in that. I surfed Marvin Foster, Jerry Lopez in a heat, Liam McNamara, Larry Rios. I'll go deeper for like I remember this is like, people are going to know some of these names, like Aaron Gerberick and Larry Rios, and Dave Cantrell was in there, and Michael Ho was one of my heats, Johnny Boy Gomes. Like, I had to surf against all those guys, and I kept getting lucky, and they were all like uncles to me, and so they're all really sweet. Even when I took a couple of them out, you know, and I was scared to be on the beach after, but I was only 17, and they're all my brother's friends and stuff. So there was one in particular, I was paddling for a wave, and Marvin Foster, I was in the position, and there was only a couple seconds left in the heat, and all I needed was like a 6 or something, and I was in 3rd place, and he was in 2nd, and he looked at me, and he's like, Jack, he's like, I'm going. I would have had to pull back. I was deeper than him, and I was like, I'm sorry, Marvin. And I just went, you know, because as soon as I took off on the wave, I was like, oh no, Marvin's gonna be so pissed. And then on the beach, he came up to me, and he was just gave me a big hug, and he was like, I had to at least try. He like started laughing at me, you know, just laughing. But yeah, so that was like the highest point of my surfing career, is when I made the finals at 17 at the Pipe Masters of the trials. And then, like you brought up, a week later, I did a little face dive into the reef and knocked out some teeth and got a lot of stitches all around my face. And it was definitely the high and the low, you know.
A backdoor barrel?
It was a pipe. It was going left. For people who know pipe well, it wasn't an exceptionally big day, but it was a heavy day. It was like a real low tide, and it was not every wave was makeable, but it was at that age. Now we've kind of like, you hear all these podcasts where people talk about like development of the frontal lobe and all this stuff. We just didn't have one yet. You know what I mean? I don't think I developed mine at all. We were pulling into closeouts every day, all day, and it was you felt a little invincible.
Yes. Even
though we were getting hurt, like sometimes you get stitches. At that point, I'd had some pretty bad stitches on my elbow, on my foot. I even got one like under my eye, hitting the bottom one time, and that wave I got hurt on, it was just one of those. It was just sort of another closeout. It wasn't that different. It wasn't exceptionally big or anything that day. It was, you know, still pretty sizable, but it wasn't like scary pipe. And when I pulled in, I just traveled. And it's sometimes fun to go into detail on this stuff when you're somewhere where surfers are listening. Everybody sees that thing when a wave closes out. A lot of times you see the water do that thing where it shoots up out the back of the wave. You know, when you see that, like off the wall and stuff. And I think what that is when a wave closes out and there's nowhere for the air to go. It you know, you see the spit sometimes when the air compresses and it shoots out of a barrel, but when it pinches or closes out and there's nowhere for the air to go, I'm assuming it just gets pushed sort of down and then back and then shoots up out the back of the wave. So it's kind of one of those things where I think what happened was when I jumped forward, you kind of look for a place on the face where you're going to penetrate and not go over the falls, but you don't want to go so low either that you're going to hit the reef. So I thought I hit the right spot on the wave, like right in that midpoint, diving forward. But I think I dove right when the air compressed and pushed down, and it was just, I remember the feeling of waiting to hit water and there was just no water there. I just jumped and then bam, straight into a rock, you know? And it dazed me where I was awake and I was aware, but barely. And I remember just thinking, okay, you just hit your head really hard and you got to swim, but I just couldn't swim. I was just like I guess I was paralyzed for a second, you know, or whatever that would be. I just couldn't move my arms. And I remember thinking like, oh, you need to move your arms. You got to swim. And I just couldn't get my body to move. And I just kept going, oh no. And I think I was only down for one wave, but I was really out of it. I think by the time I got up, I tried to take a breath, I think, and that really sent me into shock because I swallowed water. And I remember getting up and coughing and spitting all the stuff out and kind of seeing the blood all around. But it made it to the surface and got to the beach by myself. And it was right after the sun had set and it was getting kind of dark. And so there was nobody around. I had to run up and, yeah, I know.
Wow. And so as I understand it, in the healing, in the convalescence from that injury, you were playing a lot of guitar. And do you look back and go, that was maybe a kind of blessing in disguise?
Yeah. You know, what's funny is for years, I think I tried to avoid the neatness of that, of sort of like, because sometimes the story would kind of get told as my music career first started and people kind of would hear about that accident because it was in a movie, 110-240, an old surf film. And, you know, people had seen that image of me with no teeth and all stuff. And so the real quick story would be, okay, so he was a pro surfer and then he got hurt and then he started playing music because he couldn't surf anymore almost, you know? And so like, I would get all defensive and be like, no, I kept surfing. Like it just took me a month and I played a lot of guitar during that month because I couldn't surf. But, but looking back now, I kind of realized it was definitely a big turning point where, you know, something sort of happened where I really dove into guitar. I think I was like almost embarrassed. It was at that age when your face looks that funny, you know, and like I remember like just not wanting to go outside. I was like in my bedroom a lot and I was definitely like playing a lot of guitar, just kind of escaping into music. And my mom was really sweet because she was getting me all these tablature books, you know, back then. That was kind of how you'd learn a lot, is like you get these books that would show you what Hendrix was playing on that part or whatever. And so I think I love the way it felt to have headphones on and to fall asleep with music playing and kind of just like let it turn into your dreams a little bit. And I think that all sort of came together at the same time. And I don't know, something I've talked to my own kids about, like sometimes if they get an injury or going through something kind of hard, one thing I've learned in life is like these things that happen that you might wish they didn't happen at first. You know, you're thinking to yourself, like, I'm so unlucky, I just sprained my ankle, or they end up being the things that with a little time, you wouldn't take them away. I think sometimes when you realize how fragile things are, it changes everything for you, because it's like I was saying before that, we felt a little invincible. And it definitely made me second guess things. Like, it's weird. It was almost only going left. Because it was on a left and grabbing rail and going left, every time I would paddle for a wave at pipe again, I think it was in the back of my mind a little bit of like, I just had a little more of a phobia of pulling in backside. Going right, I felt totally comfortable. And I think, if anything, I started going right more. So I developed even more comfort going right and pulling in on heavy waves at backdoor. But yeah, so it definitely changed me in like my approach. And I also started kind of being realistic and thinking like, I think that might barely last if I tried that. And I had a lot of friends that are a few years older, and I could kind of see all the different paths. You know, Kelly and Rob were obviously going to have like a real solid career. And I had other friends from Hawaii, Ross and Shane, that were like, oh yeah, those guys seem like they can pull it off too. And anyways, you saw people who had like success for a few years sometimes, and then things come and kind of change real quickly. And it seemed like not a place that was going to be like a real stable future.
Yep.
I also had really, a lot of friends that tried the surfing thing, and then switched early, like almost right in the middle of it, started being a rep for a company. And I remember being young and some of us thinking like, why would they do that? They're like going to start doing an office job, you know? But they were some of my smartest friends. You look and they found like kind of a long-term stable thing. And now they're the friends that are still surfing every day because they figured out a way to be in the surf industry, but maybe not try to milk the star part.
No, it's so interesting that, and I think this probably goes for all sports, but definitely for surfing, when I talk to people who don't really understand it or are new to it, I always say, yeah, the thing about having a surf obsession and being really serious about it is it consumes your college years. You know, it's right at that time that you're kind of peaking and able to travel, and you're an adult and all that stuff. And it can be, you don't realize it at the time. Yeah. But it's often like an important time of life to be learning. So you went, so you went to UCSB and you studied film, right?
Yeah. And it's so funny you say that because I remember being at school and opening surf mags and seeing, especially if there would be like a trip where like all my friends were in Indonesia and I'd see them and I would think like, oh, did I blow it? I could have milked that thing for a year or two. I probably could have been on that trip right there, you know, and here I am studying math or whatever. At first I was doing math when I got there. Okay. And so I did start studying film. When I found film, it took me a minute. And then when I found the film path, I got really excited and I really was into it and very present at school. But I think for the first year when I didn't really know what I was doing, I saw all my friends traveling, there was definitely a little bit of regret and thinking like, man, could that have been a better education? And my dad was always funny too. My dad's a really eccentric guy. And so I remember sitting on the stairs, like putting my shoes on to go to the airport. My dad was like, you sure you want to go to California? A lot of people over there, you know? And he's like, you know, we're going to be paying a lot to put you through college. He's like, we could calculate what that is. You could maybe buy an old boat and fix that thing up and just go sail around instead, you know? And he's like, I remember just being like, Dad, why are you telling me this right now? I'm already got my bags packed. I'm going, you know, but it's funny because he put that my dad was always like a lot of reverse psychology in life too. I could never tell if he was sometimes telling us stuff just to like make you solidify it in your own mind more of what you should be doing, you know, but he would put little questions. So that would always float in my mind too, like, darn, was Dad right? Should I have just gone and traveled for a little bit, you know? Right. I felt really lucky to get to start making the surf movies after. And I remember being on my first trip and filming and thinking, oh, this is great. Like I get to see these things I was a little worried I wouldn't get to go out and see. You know?
And so in college, you're studying film. You and Chris Malloy connect to make Thicker Than Water. You make the film, and along the way, you're playing music, making music with the guys who were in the film. Yeah. At what point did you realize like how much you had in music, how much it was a part of you? Yeah.
You know, when I was at college, I started making these little 4-track tapes. Kelly had this 4-track recorder when we were teenagers, and he would leave it at my house when he would go home to Florida. And I kind of learned that if you sang a track and then you rewind it and you push record and you set yourself on a new track, you can pan the sound to one side and you put the new track on the other, and it's called doubling. You can double your voice. And you know that thing, like whenever somebody hears their own voice, it's like, wait, I sound like that, you know, and this is same for me still. It's like when I hear my voice, even on a record sometimes, when you deliver it, you think you sound one way and you hear it back and you're like, oh, okay, I guess that's what I sound like. But when you're first trying, it's like really hard. I was really insecure to hear my own voice. So I learned that if you doubled it and panned them to two different sides, you got this stereo effect that made it at least closer to the things that you loved, you know, and like, reminded you a little more of things that you were inspired by. And so I learned that little trick, and I would always double my voice on these recordings. And in college, I started doing that. And looking back now, I can definitely remember making these tapes, and then once you made them on the 4-track, then you could just get one of those standard 2 cassette players, and you could make copies. You push play on this one or record on this one next to it. And so I used to make these little copies. I made like 5 or 6, and I'd give them to friends. And then sometimes I get somebody saying, hey, so-and-so showed me your little tape. Can I get one of those? And in college, I think there was this one little mixture of songs that I'd made that probably, if I estimate, like 20 friends asked me if they could get a copy. And it's cool because now I have friends that still have it. Like every once in a while, a friend will send me a picture, and it'll have like my handwriting on it from college. And like, remember this? And like still have these things. And my wife and I met when we were 18 years old, freshman year of college. she was really into music too, and she had all these cool, everybody used to have a CD collection back then. You had your canvas thing you'd open up and had all the sleeves, and we'd share music a lot. And so she turned me on to a lot of good music. She turned me on to, and I think I used to kind of play songs, and I play them for her, and I would think like, she's pretty cool. Like her collection of CDs is pretty awesome. So if she likes a song, it probably is okay. And so she became my kind of default editor, because I'd play things around the dorm rooms for her, or like out in our little houses when we started living IV. And I could just tell from her reaction, like sometimes she would like turn her head and be like, oh, that's pretty rad. And I would think, okay, that's a good one. And then other times I'd play a song and I just wouldn't get her attention as much. And I wouldn't be offended. I would just be like, oh yeah, maybe that line's not working yet. It doesn't really do it. And then we started having conversations too, and she really became my editor. I mean, even to this day now when I make an album, she's the one that's really good about telling me like, I kind of know what you're getting at because I've heard you like talking about it and stuff, but like, I'm not sure it's clear to somebody who doesn't have the context of what you're trying to get across yet. And then, we'll talk about it, and then we'll write all the lyrics out, and she'll kind of give me her feedback. And so she really does play the role of an editor now. And she always sort of has. But Kim and I started traveling and kind of going to all these different spots. And after college, we went to Europe. We did a little road trip, and we went to Indonesia for one of the summers. And we would just kind of save up from little jobs, and then we'd go spend all our money on these trips, and then we'd come home. I think that was the beginning where I was like traveling and documenting. I bring a little Super 8 camera because at that point I was a film major, and I think my dream at that point was to be a National Geographic cinematographer. That's really what I wanted to do. I was always good at at camping and stuff like that, and I grew up kind of like being able to go on these trips with my uncle Mike Spalding and my dad, where we would barely have anything with us and kind of like last for a week out on the outer islands. And so I remember thinking, I'm pretty good at, I don't need to eat like all 3 meals in a day. I can even go a day without a meal and stuff. So like I'd be good at being one of those guys that has to hide up in a tree and wait for like a certain bird to come, and like you bait them in and stuff, and you get the camera ready. I always thought that would be like the killer job to have, is
interesting
National Geographic cinematographer. And I guess in my mind I started thinking, yeah, maybe documentary film is what I want to do. So when Chris Malloy called me, I was on a trip. Actually, my mom called me and told me that Chris was trying to get a hold of me and wanted to make this surf movie. I hadn't really thought that surf movies were what I wanted to do at that point. And I think I even wanted to avoid them, because maybe just thinking like, I don't want to stand on the beach and film my friends. Like I'd rather do something else more serious. But as soon as I went on that first trip and came home, and Chris and I started planning that thing, and I fell in love with it. I realized that this is documentary filmmaking, and this is my world, something I understand. This is something that I'll be able to document well, because when you spend so much time doing something, you start seeing a perspective that you want to capture that hasn't been captured yet, and that's what sometimes gives you something original. And so I think I realized like, I think I'd be good at making films, because you see your friends go by when you're a kid, and you sometimes even hold up your hands, pretend like you're holding a camera, and you watch them go by. So you get really good at, if somebody's taking off on a wave, at a point break, you could kind of start to estimate, okay, he's going to do a bottom turn, he's going to do a little, I can see this wave these aren't things you think, but I think in the subconscious you start realizing, okay, that wave's starting to have a little bit of a shoulder, he's probably going to fade back there. So intuitively you start kicking towards him, or you start kicking backwards really fast. There's times like shooting spots where you realize you're not in the right spot, and you got to jam 10 yards behind you, because when this barrel comes, he's going to be over there, not here. And you look down and you realize where you are on the reef and what's going to make the wave barrel. So all these little things that you don't actually think about, but they just, from a life of surfing, where to be to capture the shot. And then that thing of those things you haven't seen in films yet that you want to put in films. Like that day at Rincon, all of a sudden I saw this bird way up the point, and this wave wasn't quite breaking. Nobody caught it because it was underneath everybody. And when you see the updraft from a wave, you've seen it, but I'm kind of explaining to maybe anybody who hasn't. You see birds do it above cliffs all the time, right? They'll just soar above a cliff. They do the same thing on a wave, and this bird just came all the way down the point, and I watched the silhouette of this bird, and then I just stayed real still, and I kind of even tried to position myself to get it and the thing went like a foot away from my head, and it just kept going, knew it wasn't going to bother it. And I remember just thinking, man, if I had a camera, that would have been maybe the most beautiful shot I've ever seen in my life. If I didn't have one, I just watched it. And so you see those things, and then you think, man, if I can capture that. So then if I was still doing the film stuff, I'd probably be thinking, okay, I'm going to get out there next time there's a swell, get the camera loaded with some, like high-speed film, and just see if I can get that shot.
It's so interesting. Okay, so there's the shots, the documenting visually, but with Thicker Than Water, was there, obviously you were making the film, and then you went back and there was the editing, and then there was the composing of music.
Yeah.
Did the composing of, you and I are almost doing it now physically, where you're watching the bird and you're moving with it, right? Was there a similar thing with your guitar in your hand and your vocals, where you were sort of feeling your way into the scoring of the film?
Totally. And when we first started doing the film, I don't think we thought about me doing any of the music. We were, Chris knew that I had a little background in music, but it wasn't what we were thinking about yet. What we did love doing is exactly, we'd come home with all this footage, and there's so many ways you can go. At the time, like almost every surf film was punk music, and that was the music we were listening to and we loved, by the way. Like, to me, Taylor Steele was making the perfect surf films. Like, it wasn't necessarily like a reaction to those films. It was almost like, okay, I think we just realized that Taylor was already making perfect films. So, for that high energy, just high performance stuff, where can we fit in? How can we be a little different? And so we just wanted to show a different side of that same crew of surfers, and like a little more, I don't know, just finding those moments that maybe weren't in Taylor's films that we could maybe show. And so you would come home and you put the footage on, sometimes we'd put on a record player at the house, and we'd put on some old jazz music, and it would take the visuals one way. Then you'd put on some hip hop, and it would be a whole different thing. And then you'd put on some like Jimi Hendrix or like Santana, and it would be like, oh, that's cool too. Each one, I think anybody who works in film, you start to realize that like almost 50% and maybe more is actually the music than it is the actual visuals. It's like the soundtrack really sets something up. It's like the song can ruin a scene, or a song can make a scene.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of searching, and we would play the raw footage to all kinds of music. And the beautiful thing was, we were like all really, really good friends, like close best friends at the time. And so we were just spending all day together. It wasn't like, okay, we're going to meet for X amount of hours to edit or anything. It was just, we'd wake up in the morning, we'd go surf, we'd come back, we'd go sit there, we'd put on the footage, and we might be playing cards or ping pong or doing whatever people that age do to kill time and stuff. But we'd always have the footage on, and we'd put on new music, and then it would be like, something would come on great and be like, oh, let's go work with that. And we'd try to do an edit with that song, and then we started realizing that it would be really fun to kind of try to do a little of our own scoring. And I started kind of flipping the guitar over to play the drums on the back of the guitar, because we didn't have a drum set. And that was really just using what you had. I think if we had a drum set, we would have gone for it. But sometimes your limitations are the tools that are the best, make your things original. So when I look back now, again, I wouldn't replace any of that stuff, but it's just what we had was my thumbs on the back of my guitar for the drums, and then a little bit of acoustic guitar and Thicker Than Water. And it has a really great feel,
Yes. Was there a moment where it felt like music is going to be I'm going to have a career, career, I don't even like this word, but I'm going to have a life in music. Was there a moment where it happened, whether it was in the writing of a song, or whether it was having an audience that you went, this is going to be my life?
Totally, yeah. I can think, I started making a lot of songs while we were shooting the films that people weren't necessarily hearing, except for Emmett and Chris, my wife Kim, and a few close friends that I'd play them for. And Rodeo Clowns was a song I wrote on one of the trips. And I remember kind of playing that one, and people started even my wife's reaction when I came home, and her just saying like, whoa, that's a really good one. Like, I think that might be the best one you've written yet. And it started kind of taking form where I felt like I could maybe share them with more than just the people right around me. But I think I had a block in my own mind for a long time. Looking back, I think it was starting to happen long before I admitted it was starting to happen. But basically, trying to think, I guess when I put in the song F-Stop Blues into the movie September Sessions, we were going for another song, and last minute we were trying to finish the film. We totally thought we had this song, and then we got word that we weren't going to be able to use it. We didn't get it approved. So Emmett and Chris really encouraged me to use f-stop blues. And I think in the back of my mind, when I'd watch it with it, I knew it worked really well. It sounded beautiful with the footage. It looked really cool, but I think I felt like at the time, won't it seem really lame if the camera guy's like trying to put his music in the films, you know? Like I remember thinking that, like it just seems like everybody's gonna think I'm trying to push my music out there. And I guess I was, you know? I'm really lucky that I had friends that kind of encouraged me to do it, because without them, I think I would have been like, nah, it's not the right choice. But because we did that and we put those films out, then I would be surfing any spot, like around, whether it was at home in Hawaii or somewhere up the coast in California. And I get people starting to ask me like, oh, when are you going to put an album out? You know, and I still hadn't really thought like, oh, we're going to put an album out, but it started forming an idea in my mind of like, oh, maybe I could make a record, I guess. And then a couple things happened. This guy, JP Plunier, who was Ben Harper's manager and producer, and we were all mega fans of Ben Harper and G Love. Those were like the two guys that we were all listening to a lot. And then for some reason, our worlds were like, there's a little Venn diagram where we had some overlap, and we had a chance to meet both G Love and Ben Harper, because they're both kind of like in the surf skate world, you know. Like
Yep.
Garrett grew up surfing a lot. Ben grew up, he's a really good skateboarder, and toy, you know, like mess around with surfing. And whenever we'd be together, we would surf. But when we first had met and Ben had heard my music, him and JP had listened to it, and we were trying to use some of their music in a film we were working on at the time. And so they would come into the editing bay and check it out. And then I remember JP called me and he told me, he's like, hey, I listened to this whole, like this little group of songs on this cassette, and I think if we could put it together and actually make a record. And I just remember, I can remember where I was in like in the driveway at my house, my mom's house in Hawaii, and like hearing him say those words and thinking like, oh, am I going to get to make an album? I remember like it dawned on me right then, like I might be able to make a record.
Was there a fear of stardom? Was there a fear of getting big?
Yeah. I mean, well, I wouldn't call it even a fear. I don't think I thought it was going to happen. I really can honestly tell you, like I made that first record, and when it was all done and mixed and nobody had heard it yet, I remember telling my wife, we were driving, listening to the like final mixes. And I remember thinking, like, I said it to her, I just said, I just hope somebody feels about this album the way that like Ben Harper's records make me feel. It's like, I don't expect this to be like, you know, huge, but I just hope I hope it's somebody's favorite record, you know? And I remember having that feeling, and I felt like it was maybe good enough for that. I thought like I put my heart in this thing, and like I really like doing this, and I, you know, try to put all my emotions into it, and I hope that I hope somebody really digs it. I think that's as big as I dreamed, you know. It's like I think it actually took me putting the first album out, and then I even got invited by Ben Harper to come on tour. I was his opening band that next year. Right before I went on tour, JP actually gave me this confusing choice. He said, hey, we're also thinking about making a documentary about Ben. And he loved Thicker Than Water. He was a big fan of that movie. And so he said, you could come out and open for him, or you could come out and do this documentary on him. And so I had this choice. I was like, oh, I could follow this path of filmmaking, which is, I do feel like I could do that. I do feel like I've already taken the first steps. I know how to use the camera. I know how to kind of we've done a couple of films all the way through now. So maybe that would be a better step. You know, I remember being a little confused there, but I think I was just like, film always felt like the best job I could ever have, but music didn't feel like a job. Music felt like, okay, if you do that, you're just following your passion and getting to goof around with something you love every day. You know?
Do you feel like surfing fits holistically into the whole equation of gestation? And are you kind of chewing on melodies and words and lyrics, etc.?
I think so. I think it's what really links music and surfing in like a really deep way for me is that growing up on surf films and watching Tom Curran, like, you know, like watching how he put his hand and thinking, okay, next time I surf, I'm going to do that. Or like how he brings his back knee in, or just touches the water on the bottom turn, or like, you know, throws his weight this way. And you'd go out and you'd want to do that, and you'd kind of be like studying. And that was a time where everybody surfed so different. You know, like when Curran came along, not everybody surfed like that. So it was like, oh, he figured it all out. You know, he was just, to me, like the perfect way to ride a wave was Tom Curran. You'd see everywhere he's putting his weight, there's no better way to do it. And so you'd kind of study that. And as you were studying it, and like even rewinding a section and watching it again or something, that same song was playing over and over and over, and it would just get ingrained in your head. So then when you go surf, I think it just made you feel like you were ripping even harder if you were like, why do you feel like a wild child? And that was like, I remember like Aki doing the first air I had ever seen. His fins kind of came out of the water and he landed it with that song playing. And so a lot of times like I'd have that song in my head. And then over time, as I started trying to write songs, a lot of times you're sitting around the houses working on a song all day, and then you go in the water and you can't get, it's still in your head. And then lines will come to me. There's been times where I'll be out at surfing and think like, oh, there it is. I'll unlock it. When you finally put down the pen and you finally put down the guitar, is like a lot of times, and you stop thinking about it and it's less intentional. It solves the puzzle for me, you know?
Yeah, no, it's so interesting that, and I think there's so much about sleep in the present day, right? Mm-hmm. And this idea of like getting a good night's sleep, and there's all the kind of neuroscience that says how important it is. I'm a terrible sleeper, and I always have been, but I have no problem with it. I don't even like the word insomnia. I don't even think of it as that, because honestly, like I will in the middle of the night be writing things down, and I think there's a way in which you're sort of involved in something that you, as you put it so well, it's like a question you're asking or a question you're trying to solve, and there's, for myself as a writer, there's kind of sitting at the desk, literally and figuratively. But then there's also, it doesn't stop when you step away and you get on, you're driving, for instance, or you're out in the surf. It's always there. And I think it's such a wonderful thing to be in that place, to be living in that groove, basically.
Yeah. It's like, I think a lot about this, actually, what you're saying right there. It's, it never stops. And I always think of it as inhaling and exhaling. And the desk in that example with the pen, that's exhaling. You're putting it out. You're trying to get it down. For me, it's like the songwriting. You're putting it out. But going for a surf or taking a walk in the morning, or like, that's the inhaling. Like, you have to take things in to be able to put things out, And there's times where I used to come home from a long tour, and you're out there. We don't tour as much as some people, but like, let's say you go 3 weeks straight playing shows, like 3, 4, or 5 times a week. It's a lot of times in a row, and it's like a lot of music. You're playing so much. I get home, or after making a record, and every day you're in there for 12 hours a day working and playing the guitar so much, I sometimes just put the guitar down. And at first I used to think, oh, is that bad? Like, I go for a week without playing, or a month or something, and I just not have the urge to pick up a guitar. And then over time, I started realizing those were just the inhales. It was like, it was actually healthy for me to not even think of myself as a songwriter. I think sometimes if I daily think about, okay, what am I going to get down today or whatever, it's like you're kind of writing for the wrong reasons, or like you're thinking about the fact that people will hear it. I almost have to get myself into this state where I convince myself I may not put out another record. And like right now, I'm kind of in that again. It'd be fun. Like, I know it's always fun. I love getting together with a gang and like recording and the whole thing. But there's the other part of me of like, man, I'm kind of going through an inhale right now, just like take things in for a while. And if there's something worth putting out, they'll come. But I never want to sort of write just to write.
No, that's really beautiful. It's interesting, Jack, knowing you for a long time, there's watching your trajectory and knowing you when you were 17 years old, first being aware of you, knowing your older brothers, etc., and then looking at where your life has gone and your ability to have massive success out in the world, but seemingly not have it change you too much inside, and to step out on stage in slaps or slippers, as you call them, and jeans and a t-shirt.
Yeah, that's funny.
And to also not kind of be tempted or sucked into a lot of the things that happen when people's lives get big and they get famous. You've just kept it, family, surfing.
Yeah.
And I guess my question out of this would be like, as you blew up, let's say, did that raise the stakes and put more pressure on you, or were you able to kind of stay in your place and go, these are just intimate songs around the campfire?
Yeah. It's a great question. I think that I appreciate it. That's like biggest compliment I could get, is just sort of like people who know me feel like I haven't changed too much. And I do feel like you can't always be 100% successful in that, but I do feel like when I look at the last 25 years, I've been pretty lucky to be successful at that. Most of my good friends are still my good friends. You know, like guys I grew up with, all my friends from home and stuff. We still hang out all the time, and people that have become friends along the way, like musicians and stuff. We've G Love, Garrett Dutton. He's like one of my best friends in life now, and you know. I guess what it is just sort of like having people around that can tell you didn't play that well tonight. Like not just having yes people around you, you know. Having people that can mess with you, and like my sound guy, he's been the same sound guy ever since we were playing like teeny clubs and stuff. And so, you know, he can just tell me straight up like, oh, you were good last night, or like, oh man, you guys really sucked last night. Or it's having those kind of friends around, having my same. I think the biggest thing for me has been having Kim in my life the whole time. Somebody who we were just in love before any of this happened. And so just to have that through all this, when everything gets sort of weird and all these people are giving you attention, and the year before you didn't have any attention on you. So I guess just the big part of it is just keeping people who love you around you. You know, it's been a big part of that.
When you think back on all of it, is there, I want to say something you're most proud of, but maybe that's the wrong word, but there's something that you feel is that you've put out into the world or retained that is most intrinsic to who you are. When you think about the whole, and I'm speaking about music, films, surfing, family, etc.
Yeah. I think like going back to something we talked about earlier, when I first was learning songs, having my grandma around and then having my niece and nephew around, music was always kind of a family thing for me. I would have people along the way that would almost like, sometimes I get like a write-up that would be like a bad review on a record that would always be like, it just lacks any kind of edge, you know? And I think especially in your 20s, when you kind of hear that, you're like, oh, maybe I should be edgier and stuff like, you know? And I think there was a while where I felt like those kind of things would hit me if like, it's just soft, you know? It's like whatever, it's just kind of, it just always kept doing what was natural to me. That felt real natural, just to sort of like stay in that place. And the bass player in the band, he used to tell me that. He's like, just always make music that you could play on that front porch that your grandma would be proud of, you know? And so now that I'm at this age and stuff, I look back and I really do feel pretty good about the fact that most of the songs are just trying to put more love into the world, you know? And I didn't really cave into that thing of like trying to be edgy. It just wasn't my thing. I think sometimes people hear certain things and critics, like somebody, I don't know who it was, somebody said, whatever the critics say, like when somebody gives you a bad review, whatever they were criticizing you for, take that and do that more.
I've heard that one too, about writing.
I don't know who said it, but I kind of like that. It was like, the music's too boring, it's like laid back or whatever. It's like, it's kind of what they're pointing out is your thing. And maybe your thing bugs them, but like your thing is your thing, you know? And it's like, you just put out what's natural for you. Yeah.
On that note, you have your guitar next to you.
Yeah.
Would you play something?
Yeah, I would love to. So yeah, let's see, what would be a good one to play? As we were traveling, the one that's kind of fun is Holes to Heaven. It's this song where we were on this trip. It was the first trip we did for Thicker Than Water. And whatever we'd see in the daytime, like just take it on, I'd kind of go home and try to write about it at night. And that was just such a fun place to be in as a kid who was like out there traveling and trying to put it together. So I'll show you that one. This is like oh yeah, and the funny story with this one is so on the way over there, all of a sudden at the airport, I see Chris Malloy was like picking up all this, I guess it was Johnny Walker Red or something like that, or Johnny Walker Black, whatever that would be. And so he's grabbing a bunch of it, and I was thinking like, whoa, what are you getting all this for? And I didn't know it was gonna be that kind of trip, you know. And Chris, he was like, no, the captain told me to get this stuff. And so sure enough, when we got into this one zone, this one day, all these guys started boarding our boat. Like this other boat pulled up in this port we were at, and they got on. They had all these uniforms and everything, and they started going through all of our bags and looking through stuff. And then the captain got all this Johnny Walker Red out and a pack of cigarettes, and they gave it to us. And then these guys just jumped right off our boat, and they were gone, and we kept going. So a little thing like that works itself into this song. It was these experiences that it was almost like at the end of the day when we were all sitting around, I would kind of like pull out things that happened to us that day just to sort of get a reaction from my friends and like, remember that? Like here's, or last week when this happened, you know, and even just like watching these kids playing cricket, it was really cool. We got some of that's in Thicker Than Water, but So I just bring all these things and I put them into songs. I wouldn't think too much about it. It would just be the things that would make it into the songs, and they became the verses. I always say verses are kind of like our dreams, and the choruses are like myths, because Joseph Campbell would say that a dream is an individual myth, and a myth is a dream for a culture or a society, I guess.
Yeah.
And what I realized this thing, like, oh, okay, what I like about that is with verses, people don't necessarily need to know what you're talking about. They can be very personal. They can be like the dream aspect.
Yeah.
But a chorus has to kind of be a little mythical. It has to be something that there's some hook to it, not just melody-wise and stuff, but there's something to it that grabs somebody, and that's almost that thing we were talking about earlier, where it's like something they've felt, you know?
Sure.
And so this song will be a good example of that, where it's like all these things that nobody else is there and they might not know what I'm talking about, but then the chorus will get you, hopefully, you know, with the bigger thought. My dad used to say this reminded him of a diesel engine too, this part, the little riff. Like a little boat chugging along. The air was more than human and the heat was more than hungry, and the cars were square and spitting diesel fumes. Bulls were running wild because they're big and mean and sacred, and the children were playing cricket with no shoes. The next morning we woke up to a 7-hour drive. Well, there we were stuck in Port Blair, where boats break and children stare. And there were so many fewer questions when stars were still just the holes to heaven. And there were so many fewer questions when stars were still just the holes to heaven. Back to the diesel engine chugging. Disembarking from the port with no mistakes of any sort, moving south, the engine running smooth. Officials were quite friendly once we drowned them with our sweet talk, and we bribed them with our cigarettes and booze. The next morning we woke up with the sunrise to the right, moving back north to Port Blair, where boats break and children stare. And there were so many fewer questions when stars were still just the holes to heaven. And there were so many fewer questions when stars were still just the holes to heaven.
Okay, so that chorus, how and when did that come to you?
So I think that the only thing I can remember, we had this book when we were traveling to this spot that I'm trying to leave unnamed. There's just because that's the best thing to do when you travel to unknown surf spots. And there was all this information, and I forget if it was that same book, but it was a book we had on board, and somewhere I read a line about how in the old days it was a history book, and they were saying that they maybe used to believe that the little lights up there, the stars, were like pinholes in this dome over us, and the light from heaven was just coming through those only certain spots. Like, and I thought that was just, you know, we're out here in the middle of the ocean and this most beautiful sky and looking up and watching the stars at night, and it was fun to just try to like really convince yourself, okay, that's just light coming through from heaven, you know.
Yeah.
So I guess the idea was just, I had that floating around as the chorus. Like anybody can relate to that. Of sometimes when life gets too busy or life gets complicated by all the things we know now, like maybe it's like simpler sometimes just to let yourself believe that those could just be holes to heaven, you know, rather than, oh shucks, that one's exactly X amount of light years away, and this one is a magnitude of this, and it's a burning ball of light up there. I don't know. So that idea, and again, like sometimes the songs for me, it's like the chorus might be one thing, the verse might be another. I put them together, I try them. If they work, they work. And then a lot of times that might be the first verse in the chorus, and then when I see what the connection is, then it helps me write the second verse, you know. But you need those little moments to kind of unlock it, those little sparks.
Is the guitar always close to you when you're at home? Is there one sort of sitting next to the bed? And
Yeah, always one around.
Yeah.
I do keep one right by the bed. That's a good thing to do, because a lot of times it's like you were talking about earlier, in those sort of like wake up in the middle of the night. Well, usually because my wife's sleeping next to me, I'll go play downstairs if I do wake up that late or anything. But for the morning, when I wake up in the morning, sometimes it's fun to have one right there, or late at night. We've had in the same way I was explaining, I grew up in a musical house, not with instruments, but with a lot of music. It's been fun now to take that to the next level, where I have a drum set in the living room and a piano in the living room, and there's always like bass. Our living room, there's no TV, it's just all musical instruments everywhere, you know. And that's always been the case for my wife and I. When we got our first apartment together, I have a line in a song that goes, let me see, it goes, do you remember when we first moved in together? The piano took up the living room. Because we had this small little apartment, and it would be like if that wall behind me there is even smaller, and the piano actually didn't fit on the wall. It stuck out like about a foot past. And so it was into the doorway into our bedroom. So to get into our bedroom, you used to have to shimmy sideways. It wasn't even a full doorway. But it was so important to have that piano in the house, because I got it for Valentine's Day. I found this $99 piano, and we still have it. The thing is beautiful. I can't believe I got it for $99.
Wow.
And so anyways, your question about is music always nearby? It's like, not only is the guitar nearby, but like the jam is always, like I'll come home sometimes and I'll just hear like a jam happening in the house. And I'll get in there, and it's like my daughter playing piano, my son playing drums, you know, and
wow,
it's cool. It's
that's
like
so great.
A real musical house, a lot of fun.
I've hit everything I want to hit. Anything that
Sweet. Yeah, no, this is fun, man.
great fun.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
It's always fun talking off the mic, so it's fun to get to do it on the mics.
Yeah. Thank you, Jack.
Yeah, right on, Jamie. Appreciate it.
Soundings is brought to you by the Surfer's Journal and is produced by me, Jamie Brissick, and Jonathan Shiflett. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Our theme song is Give Me a Wave by Oscar Matsumiya and Paz Len Chanton. The Surfer's Journal is a reader-supported publication made possible by sponsorship from Costa Sunglasses, Finisterre, Freefly, Howler Brothers, Patagonia, Rainbow Sandals, Vans, and Yeti. The journal is published bi-monthly. If you haven't done so yet, I encourage you to visit surfersjournal.com and subscribe. This episode of Soundings has been presented by Rainbow Sandals. From day one, Rainbow has lived by a simple principle. If something's worth making, it's worth keeping. That's why they stand behind a philosophy of repair, reuse, and recycle. Even beyond the warranty, Rainbow will clean, repair, and donate your used sandals to someone in need. We'd like to thank Rainbow Sandals for their proud support of this podcast. Thank you for listening to Soundings, and until next time.